The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. I remember that detail vividly because it was the day I always watered my houseplants, a routine as predictable as the sunrise. The hospital's number flashed on my screen, and instantly I knew something wasn't right. My heart skipped several beats as I answered. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mr. Patterson? This is Nurse Reyes from Memorial Hospital. Your daughter Eliza was brought in about an hour ago. She asked us to call you. The nurse's voice was calm but carried that professional gravity that makes your stomach drop. She's been in a car accident. Time seemed to slow as I processed those words. My daughter. Car accident. Hospital. I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter to steady myself. Is she... How bad is it? I managed to ask, my mouth suddenly desert dry. She's stable, but she's suffered some injuries that will require surgery. The doctor would like to speak with you when you arrive. I thanked the nurse, hung up, and stood frozen for a moment. Eliza, my only child. The thought of her hurt sent a physical pain through my chest. We hadn't spoken in nearly 3 months, another one of our cooling-off periods. After an argument about her boyfriend Mark, a man I believed was taking advantage of her generosity. Our last conversation had ended with her telling me to stay out of her business, and me responding that she'd come around when she needed something. Not my finest moment as a father. I grabbed my keys, wallet, and jacket, then headed for the door. The drive to Memorial took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind raced with every worst-case scenario. I'd been estranged from my daughter before, but never had I imagined reconciling with her in a hospital room. The emergency department was bustling when I arrived. I approached the front desk, gave Eliza's name, and was directed to the surgical waiting area on the 3rd floor. The elevator ride up felt claustrophobic, each floor number lighting up in agonizing slowness. When I reached the waiting area, a doctor in blue scrubs was already there. Dr. Winters, according to her name badge, had the kind of face that inspired confidence, steady eyes, and calm features. Mr. Patterson, I'm Dr. Winters. I'm handling your daughter's case. She extended her hand, which I shook automatically. Let's sit down. We settled into the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, and she explained the situation. Eliza had been T-boned at an intersection by a driver who ran a red light. Her left leg was fractured in 2 places. She had 3 broken ribs, and there was internal bleeding that needed immediate attention. We're prepping her for surgery now, Dr. Winters said. The procedure should take about 4 hours. She's young and otherwise healthy, which gives us excellent odds for a full recovery, but she's going to need extensive rehabilitation. I nodded, absorbing the information as best I could. Can I see her before the surgery? Briefly. She's being prepped, but I can give you a few minutes. Dr. Winters led me through double doors into a pre-op area. Eliza lay on a gurney, already hooked up to monitors and an IV. Her face was pale except for an angry bruise blooming across her right cheekbone. Her usually vibrant brown hair lay flat against the pillow. She looked so small, so vulnerable, nothing like the strong-willed woman who had told me off 3 months ago. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached. Recognition, then surprise crossed her features. Dad? Her voice was weak, rough at the edges. I'm here, sweetheart. I reached for her hand, the one without the IV, and held it gently. They called me. You're going to be okay. She nodded slightly, then winced. They said I need surgery. Yes, but Dr. Winters says you're going to make a full recovery. Something flickered across her face. Fear, perhaps, or pain. Mark. Can you call Mark? He doesn't know. I swallowed my immediate reaction. Now wasn't the time for our old arguments. Of course. I'll call him right away. A nurse approached, apologetic but firm. We need to take her now. I squeezed Eliza's hand one last time. I'll be right here when you wake up. Everything's going to be fine. She gave me the faintest smile before they wheeled her away, and I was left standing there, watching the double doors swing closed behind her. Back in the waiting room, I called Mark. The conversation was brief and awkward. He sounded genuinely shocked and concerned, but said he was 3 hours away at a business conference and couldn't leave immediately. He promised to drive back as soon as his afternoon meeting concluded. I bit my tongue rather than point out that his, quote, noon meeting apparently took precedence over Eliza's emergency surgery. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next 4 hours were an exercise in patience and anxiety. I made calls to my sister Karen, who promised to drive in from Portland the next day, and to Eliza's workplace to let them know what had happened. I paced the waiting room, drank terrible coffee, and thumbed through outdated magazines without absorbing a word. Every time the doors opened, I looked up hopefully, but it was never about Eliza. Finally, Dr. Winters returned, still in her surgical scrubs but with a mask pulled down around her neck. I stood immediately, searching her face for clues. "The surgery went well," she said, and I felt my knees go weak with relief. We repaired the internal bleeding and set her leg. She's in recovery now and will be moved to the ICU shortly for close monitoring over the next 48 hours. "When can I see her?" "She'll be heavily sedated for the rest of today. I'd recommend you go home, get some rest, and come back tomorrow morning. She should be more alert then." I nodded, though the thought of leaving felt wrong somehow. "Is there anything she needs? Anything I should bring tomorrow?" "Just yourself," Dr. Winters said kindly. "The hospital provides the essentials, and she won't be up for much more than brief visits for the next couple of days." I thanked her, got my parking validated, and headed home in a daze. My house felt emptier than usual that night. I heated up leftover lasagna but barely tasted it. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by vivid dreams of car crashes and hospital corridors that never ended. The next morning, I was at the hospital by 8 a.m., armed with a small overnight bag containing Eliza's toiletries. I still had a spare set from when she'd stayed with me last Christmas, her favorite lip balm, and a soft throw blanket from her childhood bedroom, which I'd preserved exactly as she'd left it when she moved out 6 years ago. The ICU was quieter than the emergency department had been. A nurse directed me to Eliza's room, explaining that visits were limited to 20 minutes every hour. I nodded my understanding and steeled myself before entering. Eliza looked marginally better than she had pre-surgery, though that wasn't saying much. The monitors beeped steadily beside her, and her left leg was elevated and encased in a bulky cast. Her eyes were closed when I entered, but they opened as I set the bag down. "Dad," she said, her voice still raspy, "you came back." "Of course I did." I pulled a chair close to her bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." A weak attempt at humor. "But the nurses say everything's looking good." "That's what Dr. Winters told me yesterday." "You gave me quite a scare, Eliza." She hadn't let me call her that since high school, but she didn't correct me now. Instead, she asked, "Did you reach Mark?" I nodded. "He said he'd come as soon as his meeting was over yesterday." Her brow furrowed slightly. "He didn't call me." "Maybe he tried the hospital directly?" I suggested, though I doubted it. She seemed to accept this explanation, too tired to question it further. We talked a little more careful, surface-level conversation that avoided our months of silence. I told her Karen was driving in. She asked about my garden. Neither of us mentioned our fight. When the nurse came to tell me my 20 minutes were up, I promised to return for the next visiting window. In the hallway, I checked my phone. No messages from Mark. I tried calling him again, but it went straight to voicemail. I left another message, my tone considerably less friendly this time. Over the next 3 days, I fell into a routine. I'd arrive at the hospital early, visit Eliza during each allowed window, and spend the time in between in the waiting room or cafeteria. Karen arrived on the second day and joined me for several visits before heading to my house to sleep in the guest room. Eliza's condition improved steadily. They moved her out of the ICU and into a regular room, where the visiting restrictions were less stringent. Mark never showed up. On the 4th day, as I sat beside Eliza's bed reading aloud from a novel she'd mentioned liking, she suddenly asked, "Has Mark called you?" I set the book down. This was the question I'd been dreading. "No, sweetheart. I've left him several messages, but he hasn't returned my calls." Her face crumpled slightly before she regained control. "He texted me this morning. He said he's really busy with work and can't get away right now. He asked if I could just have the doctors call him with updates instead of him coming here because—" She swallowed hard. "Because it's inconvenient for him to make the drive." The word, inconvenient, hung in the air between us. I carefully controlled my expression, though inside I was seething. Inconvenient? His girlfriend of 2 years was hospitalized after major surgery, and a visit was inconvenient? "I'm sure he's just overwhelmed," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Some people don't handle hospitals well." "Right," she said flatly. "It's inconvenient." I watched her face, seeing the hurt she was trying to mask with indifference. This was the moment I could have said, "I told you so." I could have reminded her of all my warnings about Mark, how I'd said he was selfish, how I'd predicted he'd disappoint her when it really mattered. But the fragile truce between us was too precious to risk. Instead, I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm here. Karen's here. You're not alone, Eliza." She nodded, blinking rapidly. "The doctor says I can go home in a few days, but I'll need help. I can't manage the stairs to my apartment, and I can't drive for at least 6 weeks. You'll come stay with me," I said without hesitation. "The guest room is on the main floor, and I can work from home most days." "But what about?" "No buts. It's already decided." For a moment, I thought she might argue, assert her independence as she had so many times before. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you, Dad." 2 days later, Dr. Winters confirmed that Eliza could be discharged the following morning. She'd need follow-up appointments, physical therapy, and constant care for at least the next month. I spent the day preparing the guest room, installing grab bars in the bathroom, and rearranging furniture to accommodate her wheelchair and eventual crutches. Karen helped, bringing in extra pillows and setting up a small table beside the bed for medications and water. "Have you heard anything more from Mark?" she asked as we made up the bed with fresh sheets. "Not a word," I said grimly, and Eliza's stopped mentioning him. Karen shook her head. "I never liked him. Too slick, you know. Always had the right answer, but it never felt genuine." I nodded. I'd had the same impression, though I'd expressed it more bluntly during that final argument with Eliza. "She deserves better." "She does," Karen agreed. "But she needs to realize that for herself." The next morning, I arrived at the hospital early with clothes for Eliza and a wheelchair I'd borrowed from a neighbor. The discharge process took longer than expected. Forms to sign, prescriptions to fill, care instructions to review. Throughout it all, Eliza was quiet, seemingly lost in thought. It wasn't until we were in the car, headed home, that she finally spoke. "Mark broke up with me." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, but kept my eyes on the road. "When?" "Last night. By text." Her voice was eerily calm. "He said he's not in a place where he can handle this level of commitment." I took a deep breath, trying to contain the fury building inside me. "I'm so sorry, Eliza." "Are you?" There was an edge to her voice now. "I thought you'd be happy. You never liked him anyway." "I'm not happy that you're hurt," I said carefully. "I'm never happy about that, no matter the circumstances." She was silent for a long moment. "You were right about him. That day we fought. Everything you said turned out to be true." I pulled up to a red light and turned to look at her. I wish I hadn't been. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. I was such an idiot. "No," I said firmly. "You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That doesn't make you an idiot. It makes him unworthy." The light turned green, and I focused back on the road, giving her a moment of privacy to wipe her tears. We drove the rest of the way in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not the tense quiet of unspoken arguments, but something more contemplative. When we arrived home, Karen was waiting on the porch. Between the two of us, we managed to get Eliza inside and settled in the guest room. I brought her lunch on a tray, made sure she took her pain medication, and then left her to rest while Karen and I talked quietly in the kitchen. Mark broke up with her. I told my sister. By text. Karen's eyes widened. What a coward. I'm trying very hard not to say anything that might sound like, I told you so. That's probably wise, she said, patting my arm, but for what it's worth, I think this might be the best thing that could have happened. Not the accident, obviously, but her finally seeing him for who he really is. I wasn't so sure. Yes, Eliza was better off without Mark, but at what cost? She was physically injured, emotionally wounded, and now dependent on the father she'd been actively avoiding for months. It wasn't the reconciliation I would have chosen. Over the next few days, we settled into a new routine. Karen stayed for a week, helping with household chores and keeping Eliza company while I worked. Eliza slept a lot, her body focused on healing. When she was awake, our conversations were polite but superficial. We'd rebuilt a fragile bridge between us, but neither of us seemed ready to test its strength. After Karen left, it was just the two of us. I brought Eliza her meals, helped her to and from the bathroom, and drove her to medical appointments. During one particularly difficult physical therapy session, when she couldn't hold back tears of pain and frustration, I held her hand and reminded her to breathe, just as I had when she was a little girl learning to ride a bike. I hate being so helpless, she confessed later that night as I helped her back into bed. I hate that you have to do everything for me. I don't mind, I told her. That's what fathers are for. She looked away. Even fathers whose daughters shut them out for months? And there it was. The elephant in the room finally acknowledged. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Especially those fathers. Because they have a lot of time to make up for. She fiddled with the edge of her blanket. I was so angry with you. I thought you were trying to control my life. That you couldn't accept I was an adult capable of making my own decisions. And I thought you were being stubborn and blind to Mark's flaws. I admitted. I should have found a better way to express my concerns. Would it have mattered? Would I have listened? I considered this. Probably not. Sometimes we have to learn things the hard way. She was quiet for a moment. When I was in the hospital and he wouldn't come, I kept making excuses for him. Work is important. He's not good with hospitals. He'll come tomorrow. She shook her head. But you were there every single day, multiple times a day, even though we hadn't spoken in months. You're my daughter, I said simply. Nothing changes that. Even when I'm difficult? Especially then. That's when you need me most, even if you don't realize it. She reached for my hand and I gave it to her. I'm sorry, Dad, for pushing you away, for choosing him over you. And I'm sorry for not respecting your choices, even when I disagreed with them. I squeezed her hand gently. But I'm not sorry about being right about Mark. A small smile tugged at her lips. That's as close to an I told you so as you're going to get, isn't it? For now, I agreed, returning her smile. I might save the rest for when you're fully recovered. Fair enough. She yawned, the pain medication making her drowsy. Thanks for taking me in, Dad. I don't know what I would have done without you. You'll never have to find out, I promised, tucking the blanket around her as she drifted off to sleep. That night, as I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, I thought about how quickly life can change. One moment, you're watering houseplants on a Tuesday morning. The next, you're rebuilding a relationship you feared was permanently broken. It wasn't the way I would have chosen to reconcile with my daughter. But I was grateful for the second chance, whatever form it took. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Eliza still had months of physical recovery ahead of her. She'd need to rebuild her independence, find a new apartment with no stairs, possibly even look for a new job that could accommodate her temporary limitations. And we'd need to continue working on our relationship, learning to communicate better, and respect each other's boundaries. But as I sat there in the quiet house, listening to the soft sounds of my daughter sleeping down the hall, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Not just for Eliza's physical recovery, but for the healing of the wounds between us that had gone untreated for far too long. Sometimes life's most profound lessons come wrapped in pain and inconvenience. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal who truly cares and who's just passing through. And sometimes the most important journey isn't the road to physical recovery, but the path back to the people who never stopped loving us, even when we pushed them away. The first week after Eliza came home from the hospital was the hardest. Pain was her constant companion, turning simple tasks into monumental challenges. Getting out of bed, using the bathroom, even shifting position in her wheelchair, everything extracted its toll in winces and stifled groans. At night, I'd sometimes hear her crying softly in her room, but when I checked on her, she'd quickly wipe away her tears and claim she was fine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I knew better, of course. A lifetime of raising her had taught me to recognize when she was putting on a brave face. But I also understood her need for dignity, so I pretended to believe her. Instead of confronting her directly, I focused on making things easier in ways she might accept, adding extra pillows for support, keeping her medications and water within easy reach, learning which positions caused her the least discomfort. We were walking a delicate line, Eliza and I. Our reconciliation was too new, too fragile to withstand direct confrontations. So we built our new relationship on small kindnesses and careful considerations, testing its strength with cautious conversations about safe topics. I've been thinking about getting a dog, I mentioned one morning as I helped her to the kitchen table for breakfast. This house feels too quiet sometimes. She looked surprised. You always said pets were too much work. That was when I was working 60 hours a week, I replied, setting a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. Now that I've cut back, I think I'd enjoy the company. What kind would you get? I was thinking a rescue. Maybe something medium-sized. Good temperament matters more than breed. She nodded, considering. I've always wanted a dog. Mom never allowed it because of her allergies. The mention of her mother, my late wife Sarah, who had died of cancer when Eliza was 14, created a moment of shared sadness. It was a wound we both carried, though we rarely discussed it. She would have made an exception eventually, I said softly. She could never say no to you for long. Eliza smiled, a genuine one that reached her eyes. Remember when I begged for those horrible platform sneakers? The ones that made you look like you were walking on bricks? How could I forget? You fell 3 times the first day you wore them, and Mom just kept saying, "I told you so," while helping me up. We both laughed, and for a moment it felt like old times. Before the arguments, before Mark, before the long silence that had stretched between us. It was the first time we'd reminisced about Sarah without the conversation ending in awkward silence or tears. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Later that day, as I helped Eliza with her physical therapy exercises, I noticed she seemed more present, less withdrawn. You seem in better spirits today, I observed cautiously. She concentrated on lifting her injured leg the prescribed few inches. I think I actually slept last night. First time since the accident that pain didn't wake me up every couple of hours. That's progress. Baby steps, she agreed, then laughed. Literally, in my case. I smiled, relieved to see her sense of humor returning. The physical therapist said you're doing well. Ahead of schedule, even. She's just being nice. Eliza lowered her leg, wincing slightly. But I am trying. I want to get back to normal as soon as possible. There's no rush, I reminded her. Recovery takes time. She looked away. I know, but I hate being dependent. And I know it's a lot for you to handle. Eliza, look at me. I waited until she met my eyes. This isn't a burden. I'm your father. Being here for you is exactly where I want to be. She swallowed hard. Even after everything? Even after everything, I confirmed. Our disagreements don't change who we are to each other. We completed her exercises in a comfortable silence. Afterward, as I helped her back to the couch, she asked, "Would you mind bringing my laptop from my room? I should check my work email." See what I'm missing. I retrieved her computer, set it up on the lap desk I'd bought for her, and left her to catch up with her colleagues. Her job as a graphic designer for a marketing firm had been understanding about her accident, granting her medical leave without question. Still, I knew she worried about falling behind or being replaced. When I returned with tea an hour later, I found her staring at the screen, her expression troubled. "Everything okay at work?" I asked. "Work's fine," she said, closing the laptop. "It's..." Mark's sister messaged me. I set the tea down carefully, trying not to show my immediate tension at the mention of his name. What did she want? Quote, "To apologize for her brother's behavior. She said she was horrified when she found out how he treated me." Eliza's voice was flat, emotionless. Apparently he's already dating someone new. He brought her to Sunday dinner at their parents' house last weekend. The speed of his moving on didn't surprise me, but I kept that thought to myself. "How do you feel about that?" She shrugged, wincing as the movement jarred her ribs. "I don't know. Numb, mostly. Maybe a little relieved that I'm not crazy for being angry with him." She picked up her tea, staring into the cup. "His sister said their parents were upset with him too. They always liked me." "Of course they did. You're likable." I sat in the armchair adjacent to the couch. It's good that his family recognizes his behavior was wrong. I guess. She took a sip of tea. "It just makes me wonder what was real. We were together for 2 years, Dad. 2 years. And he couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital or even help me after I got out. Some people reveal who they truly are in a crisis," I said carefully, "and it's not always who we hoped they were." She was quiet for a long moment. "I keep thinking about all the warning signs I ignored. The times he canceled plans because something, more important, came up. How he was never available when I needed emotional support but expected me to drop everything for him." She shook her head. "You saw it. I didn't want to." "You saw what you wanted to see," I said gently. "We all do that sometimes." "But you didn't. You saw him clearly from the beginning." I hesitated, not wanting to seem smug. I had the advantage of emotional distance, and more years of watching people reveal their true character. "Is that why you and Mom lasted? Because you saw each other clearly?" The question caught me off guard. Eliza rarely asked about my relationship with her mother. "Not at first," I admitted. "We had our share of illusions about each other in the beginning, but we grew into seeing each other clearly, flaws and all, and choosing each other anyway. That's what makes a relationship last. Not the absence of problems, but the commitment to face them together." She absorbed this, nodding slowly. "I don't think Mark ever saw me clearly. I was just convenient. Until I wasn't." The word hung between us, inconvenient. A callback to his cruel text message from the hospital. "His loss," I said simply. She gave me a small smile, but I could see the hurt still lingering in her eyes. Healing would take time, and not just for her physical injuries. That evening, after helping Eliza to bed, I sat on the back porch with a glass of iced tea, watching fireflies blink in the gathering darkness. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "How's she doing?" my sister had written. "Better physically. Emotionally still processing," I replied. "And how are you holding up?" I paused before answering, considering the question honestly. How was I? Tired, certainly. The caregiving routine was demanding, especially alongside my work responsibilities. But there was something else too, a sense of purpose, of rightness and being there for my daughter when she needed me most. "I'm good," I wrote back. "Really good, actually." "Told you so," came Karen's immediate response, followed by a winking emoji. She had been telling me for months that Eliza and I would find our way back to each other. I just hadn't expected it to happen like this. The next few weeks brought steady improvement. Eliza graduated from the wheelchair to crutches for short distances, allowing her more independence around the house. Her pain decreased, and with it, her dependence on the stronger medications that had left her foggy and fatigued. The bruises on her face faded from angry purple to yellowy green before disappearing completely. With her increased mobility came a restlessness that I recognized from her childhood. Eliza had never been good at sitting still, even when sick or injured. She began asking about returning to her apartment, tentatively at first, then with increasing frequency. "I appreciate everything you've done," she said one evening as we finished dinner, "but I need to start getting back to my life." "The doctor said you're still weeks away from managing stairs," I reminded her. "I know, but I could look for a first-floor apartment in the meantime, start packing up my current place." I set down my fork, studying her. "Is it really so terrible being here?" Her expression softened. "No, Dad, it's not terrible at all. That's not what I meant." "Then what is it?" "Because if you need more space or privacy, we can arrange that. I can make myself scarce more often." "It's not about you," she insisted. "It's about me needing to feel in control of my life again. The accident, the surgery, Mark's betrayal. Everything has been happening to me. I need to start making things happen for myself." Quote, I understood that feeling all too well. After Sarah died, I'd thrown myself into work and home projects, anything to feel like I had some control when my world was spinning apart. "I get it," I said. "But there's a difference between taking control and pushing yourself too hard, too soon." She smiled wryly. "Now you sound like my physical therapist." "Smart woman, your physical therapist." Eliza laughed, then grew serious again. "What if we compromise? I'll stay here until the doctor clears me for stairs, but in the meantime, I can start looking for a new place. Maybe even look at apartments in this neighborhood." She hesitated. "If you wouldn't mind having me nearby, that is." The suggestion took me by surprise. Eliza had deliberately chosen an apartment across town when she'd moved out, claiming she needed "space to grow." The idea that she now wanted to be closer sent a warm feeling through my chest. "I'd like that very much," I said, "and that sounds like a reasonable compromise." The next day, I brought home a stack of apartment listings from a realtor friend. Eliza and I pored over them together, discussing the pros and cons of each location. It felt surreal, this easy companionship that had been absent for so long. We didn't agree on everything. She favored modern high-rises while I thought she'd be happier in one of the converted Victorian homes that dotted our neighborhood, but the disagreements remained good-natured. One Saturday, about 6 weeks after the accident, I wheeled Eliza into a sprawling farmer's market in the park near our house. It was her first major outing since coming home from the hospital, and though she tried to hide it, I could tell she was nervous about being in public. "We don't have to stay long," I assured her, as we navigated between stalls selling fresh produce and homemade bread. "Just say the word when you've had enough." She nodded, her knuckles white where she gripped the arms of the wheelchair. But as we made our way through the market, stopping to sample local honey and admire handcrafted jewelry, I watched her gradually relax. She even struck up a conversation with a young potter selling ceramic mugs, discussing glazing techniques with genuine interest. We were examining a display of heirloom tomatoes when someone called Eliza's name. Looking up, I saw a young woman with bright red hair hurrying toward us, her face alight with recognition. "Eliza, oh my gosh, I heard about your accident." She bent down to hug Eliza carefully. "How are you?" "I'm doing better, Jenna. This is my dad, James Patterson." "Dad, this is Jenna Collins. We worked together at my last job." I shook Jenna's hand, noting the genuine concern in her expression as she turned back to Eliza. "We've all been so worried," Jenna said. "A bunch of us wanted to visit you in the hospital, but Mark said you weren't up for visitors." Eliza's smile faltered. "Mark said that?" Jenna nodded. "He told everyone you were only allowed immediate family because of some infection risk." She frowned. "Was that not true?" "No," Eliza said quietly. "There was no infection risk." An awkward silence fell. Jenna glanced between us, clearly sensing she'd stumbled into something uncomfortable. "Well, anyway, I'm really glad to see you out and about. We should get coffee soon. I miss our lunch breaks." "I'd like that," Eliza said, recovering her composure. "I'll text you." After Jenna left, Eliza was quiet, her earlier enjoyment of the outing clearly dimmed. I didn't press her, instead suggesting we head home. She nodded, looking suddenly tired. It wasn't until we were back in the car that she spoke. He lied to everyone. Told them I couldn't have visitors so they wouldn't know he wasn't there. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. He was covering his tracks. And I would have never known if I hadn't run into Jenna today. She stared out the window. How many other lies did he tell that I'll never discover? Does it matter? I asked gently. You already know the important truth. That he wasn't the person you thought he was. She was silent for a moment. I guess what bothers me most is how easily everyone believed him. How easily I believed him for so long. Liars succeed because they take advantage of our trust, I said. That's not a flaw in you, Eliza. It's a flaw in him. She turned to look at me. When did you get so wise? I smiled. Around the time my hair started turning gray. It's nature's compensation. That got a small laugh from her, which I counted as a victory. Back at home, Eliza retreated to her room, claiming she needed to rest. I busied myself with preparing dinner, trying to give her the space she clearly needed. But when I went to call her for the meal, I found her sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, tears streaming down her face. Eliza, what is it? Quote, she looked up, startled, then quickly wiped her eyes. Nothing, I'm fine. I stepped into the room. Clearly not. What happened? She hesitated, then handed me her phone. On the screen was a social media post from Mark, a photo of him with a blonde woman, both smiling broadly at the camera. The caption read, "Sometimes the universe knows what you need before you do. #blessed, #new beginnings." The post was dated just 2 weeks after Eliza's accident. I handed the phone back, struggling to keep my expression neutral. Why are you still following him on social media? I wasn't, she said miserably. Jenna sent this to me. She thought I should know. I sat down beside her, careful not to jostle her injured leg. Some friend. She meant well. She thinks she's protecting me from being blindsided later. Maybe, I conceded. But timing matters. Eliza wiped her eyes again. I'm not even sure why I'm crying. I don't want him back. Not after everything. You're mourning what you thought you had, I said. The future you imagined. That's natural, Eliza. She leaned against my shoulder, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. You're human. We all make mistakes in love. Even you and Mom? I smiled sadly. Especially me and your mom. Our first year of marriage was a disaster. We nearly separated. She pulled back, surprised. You never told me that. You were too young to remember. We figured it out eventually, but it wasn't easy. I brushed a strand of hair from her face. The point is, one failed relationship doesn't define you. It teaches you. What if I never trust my judgment again? You will, I assured her, with time and perspective, and maybe a little more caution, which isn't a bad thing. She considered this, then nodded slowly. I think I'm ready for dinner now. As we ate, I watched Eliza push her food around her plate, still clearly distracted by the social media post. What if we got out of town for a few days? I suggested. Once the doctor clears you for longer trips, maybe go up to the lake house. Our family cabin on Lake Harmony had been a source of solace during difficult times. After Sarah died, Eliza and I had spent a whole summer there, healing beside the water. The lake house? She looked up, interested. I haven't been there in years. It needs some work, but the caretaker keeps it habitable. Change of scenery might do us both good. I'd like that, she said, her expression brightening for the first time since our encounter with Jenna. Remember how we used to catch fireflies in jars on the dock? And your mother would make us release them before bedtime, I added, smiling at the memory. She said they had families waiting for them. That was your mom, always thinking about the firefly families. Eliza laughed, a real laugh that reminded me so much of Sarah that my heart ached with both joy and loss. The lake house sounds perfect, Dad. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about the day's revelations. Mark's additional deceptions didn't surprise me, but they clearly still had the power to wound Eliza. I wished I could shield her from that pain, but I knew that wasn't my role anymore. She needed to process this betrayal in her own way, on her own terms. My job was simply to be there, steady and supportive, without judgment or "I told you so's." It was a delicate balance, respecting her independence while providing the safety net she needed right now. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized that this difficult time had given us something precious. A chance to rebuild what had been broken between us. Not identical to what we'd had before. We'd both changed too much for that, but something new and potentially stronger for having been tested. The accident that had nearly taken my daughter from me had, paradoxically, brought her back into my life. And despite the pain and challenges that came with it, I couldn't help feeling grateful for this unexpected second chance. The doctor's clearance for our trip to Lake Harmony came 8 weeks after the accident. By then, Eliza had graduated from crutches to a walking boot for short distances, though she still needed the wheelchair for longer outings. Her physical recovery was proceeding well, ahead of schedule, according to her therapist, but I suspected the emotional healing was lagging behind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The drive to the lake house took just over 3 hours. We left early on a Thursday morning, the car packed with groceries, board games, and more pillows than 2 people could possibly need. Eliza was quiet for the first hour, staring out the window as suburban neighborhoods gave way to farmland and then to the dense pine forest that surrounded Lake Harmony. "I'd forgotten how beautiful it is up here," she said finally, as we wound along the lakeside road. "Everything's so green. It's been too long since we visited." I agreed. 6 years at least. 7, she corrected. "The summer after I graduated college." I nodded, remembering. "You brought that friend of yours." "Chelsea? Chloe," Eliza said with a small smile. She was terrified of the water. Wouldn't go in past her knees. "That's right. You spent the whole weekend trying to coax her onto the paddleboard." "Never succeeded." She laughed. "Some friendships aren't meant for shared activities." I glanced at her. "You two still in touch?" "Not really. She moved to Seattle a few years ago." Eliza sighed. "I'm not great at maintaining long-distance friendships." Something in her tone made me think she wasn't just talking about Chloe. "It's hard when lives move in different directions," I offered, "but real connections have a way of surviving distance and time." She didn't respond to that, but I noticed her posture relax slightly as we continued along the winding road. The cabin came into view as we rounded the final bend. A rustic A-frame structure nestled among tall pines, its weathered deck extending over the water's edge. It wasn't grand by any means, but it had been our family's sanctuary for 3 generations. "It looks exactly the same," Eliza murmured as I pulled into the gravel driveway. "On the outside, maybe." The caretaker replaced the roof last year and updated some of the plumbing. I killed the engine. Still no Wi-Fi, though. Some things remain sacred. She rolled her eyes but smiled. "How will I survive without Instagram?" "By remembering how people lived for thousands of years before social media," I replied, getting out of the car, "with actual face-to-face conversations and books made of paper." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I retrieved Eliza's wheelchair from the trunk and helped her from the passenger seat. The cabin had a ramp that my father had installed when my mother developed arthritis in her later years, a fortunate feature given Eliza's current limitations. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and the lemon oil the caretaker used on the wooden furniture. Sunlight filtered through the large windows, creating patterns on the well-worn floor. The main room held the same mismatched furniture it had for decades. A plaid couch with sagging cushions, 2 leather armchairs that had molded to the shape of countless readers, and a heavy oak coffee table scarred with water rings and carved initials. Eliza wheeled herself to the stone fireplace, where family photos lined the mantel. She picked up one of her mother holding a toddler-sized Eliza on the dock, both of them laughing in matching swimsuits. "I don't remember this," she said softly. "You were maybe 3. I told her, setting down our bags. "It was your first time jumping off the dock. You were so proud of yourself. Mom looked so young." She was. We both were. I moved to stand beside her, looking at the photo. "That was a good summer." Eliza set the frame back carefully. "I wish I remembered more about her." "You were only 14 when she died," I reminded her gently. "But you know, you remind me of her more and more as you get older. You have her determination, her creative eye." "Her stubbornness?" Eliza suggested with a half smile. "That too. though I contributed plenty of stubbornness to your genetic makeup as well." She laughed. No argument there. We spent the rest of the afternoon settling in. I unpacked our groceries while Eliza arranged her medications and therapy equipment in the downstairs bedroom, the one that had been my parents', then mine and Sarah's, and now would be hers for our stay. I would take the loft, climbing the steep ladder-like stairs that had always given Sarah vertigo. By evening, a gentle rain had begun to fall, pattering on the metal roof and creating ripples across the lake. I built a fire in the stone hearth while Eliza prepared a simple dinner of pasta with pesto, her first real attempt at cooking since the accident. We ate at the small kitchen table, watching the rain through the windows, the firelight casting a warm glow over everything. "This is nice," Eliza said, twirling pasta around her fork. "Peaceful." "That's what I've always loved about this place," I agreed. "It feels removed from the world." I used to think that was boring. Now it seems like exactly what I need. After dinner, we played Scrabble by the fire, a family tradition. Eliza beat me soundly, as she always had. Her vocabulary had been precocious even as a child, and apparently her word skills had only improved with age. "That's 96 points for Quixotic," she announced triumphantly, placing her final tile. I groaned. "On a triple-word score, no less." "You're merciless." "I learned from the best." She gestured at me. "You and Mom never gave me a break, even when I was 9. And now look at you, a Scrabble shark." I began collecting the tiles. "Your mother would be proud." "Of my Scrabble skills?" "Of everything," I said simply. "The woman you've become." Eliza's smile faltered. "Even with all my mistakes?" "Especially with your mistakes," I told her. "Making mistakes means you're living, taking risks." Sarah understood that better than anyone. Later, as I helped Eliza with her evening physical therapy routine, I could tell she was turning something over in her mind. She was quieter than usual, concentrating hard on each movement, as if to distract herself from whatever thoughts were troubling her. "Something on your mind?" I asked finally, as she completed her last set of exercises. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever wonder what Mom would think about how things turned out? Between us, I mean." I helped her back into the wheelchair before answering. "I think she'd be sad about the time we lost," I said honestly. "But happy we found our way back to each other, even if it took a crisis to make it happen." "Do you think she'd blame me for cutting you off?" The vulnerability in her question caught me off guard. "No," I said firmly. "She'd understand that relationships are complicated, especially between parents and their adult children. She'd probably have some choice words for both of us about our communication skills, though." That drew a small smile from Eliza. "She never did tolerate stonewalling. Remember how she used to make us sit at the kitchen table until we'd talk through whatever was bothering us? No one was allowed to leave until the air was cleared." "God, yes, even if it took hours." Eliza shook her head. "I hated it at the time, but now I see how wise it was. She knew that unspoken resentments only grow in silence." "Unlike us," Eliza observed. "We let silence become our default." I couldn't argue with that. After Sarah died, our communication had suffered. I'd retreated into work and Eliza into her studies and friends. We'd maintained a superficial relationship, but the deep conversations, the kind Sarah had insisted upon, had gradually disappeared from our lives. "We're getting better at it," I offered. "This conversation, for instance." "Baby steps," she agreed, echoing her words from weeks earlier. "Speaking of which, I'm exhausted. I think it's time for bed." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the rain having washed away the summer haze. After breakfast, I helped Eliza onto the deck, where she could soak up the sunshine while I tidied the kitchen. When I joined her later with coffee, I found her sketching in a notebook, something I hadn't seen her do since before the accident. "What are you drawing?" I asked, setting her mug on the small table beside her. She turned the notebook so I could see a detailed sketch of the lake view, with careful attention to the way light played on the water. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely impressed. "I didn't know you were still drawing." "I haven't been, not really. Not for pleasure anyway." She took the notebook back. All my creative energy has gone into client work for so long that I forgot how much I love just creating. I settled into the chair beside her. Your mother was the same way. Remember her garden journals? Full of sketches and pressed flowers. I found them after she died, Eliza said quietly. In the attic. I used to look at them when I missed her most. This was news to me. I didn't know that. I never told you. I was afraid you'd be upset that I was going through her things. I shook my head, saddened by the realization that even in her grief, teenage Eliza had felt she needed to hide parts of herself from me. I would have been glad you found comfort in them. She shrugged. We weren't great at talking about her after she was gone. It was a gentle accusation, but an accurate one. After Sarah died, I'd struggled to find the balance between honoring her memory and moving forward. Too often, I'd chosen silence over the pain of remembrance. I'm sorry for that, I said. I thought I was protecting both of us from more hurt. I realize now that was a mistake. Eliza studied me for a moment. You know, that's the first time you've ever acknowledged that you might have handled things wrong after Mom died. Had I never apologized before, I searched my memory and realized she was right. I justified my emotional retreat as necessary for survival, never considering how it might have affected my grieving daughter. I should have said it years ago, I admitted. I was so focused on being strong for you that I forgot you needed me to be present more than strong. She reached over and squeezed my hand, a brief gesture of forgiveness that meant more than any words could have. We spent the morning in companionable silence, Eliza sketching, me reading a mystery novel I'd found on the cabin shelves. Around noon, I suggested a short expedition to the lake's edge. Eliza agreed, though I could tell she was nervous about navigating the uneven ground. I helped her from the wheelchair onto crutches and stayed close as we made our way down the gentle slope to the small, pebbly beach. It was slow going, but Eliza's determination never wavered, even when she slipped slightly on a patch of damp grass. I've got you, I assured her, steadying her elbow. I know, she said, and the simple confidence in those two words warmed me more than the summer sun overhead. At the water's edge, Eliza lowered herself carefully onto a large, flat rock. She removed her walking boot and dipped her toes into the lake, sighing with pleasure as the cool water lapped against her skin. I've missed this, she said, leaning back on her hands. The lake always makes me feel like I can breathe properly again. I sat beside her. It's in your blood. My parents brought me here when I was just a baby. Same with you. Do you think we could come more often? Not wait 7 years next time? I'd like that, I said, surprised and pleased by the suggestion. Maybe make it a regular thing. Like old times, she agreed. But better, because we're not taking it for granted anymore. We stayed by the water until Eliza's injured leg began to ache from the position. As I helped her back to the cabin, I noticed she was putting more weight on her healing leg than before. Not enough to cause concern, but a sign of her growing confidence in her recovery. That afternoon, as clouds began to gather again on the horizon, promising more evening rain, Eliza received a text from Jenna. She frowned at her phone. Everything okay? I asked, looking up from the fish I was preparing for dinner. It's weird, she said. Jenna says Mark's been asking about me, wanting to know how I'm doing, where I'm staying. My hands stilled on the cutting board. And what did Jenna tell him? Nothing specific, she says. Just that I'm recovering well. Eliza set down her phone. Why would he suddenly care how I'm doing? I chose my words carefully. People are complicated. Maybe seeing you move on has made him reconsider his choices. Or maybe he just doesn't like the idea that I'm doing fine without him, she said, a new edge to her voice. That's equally possible, I acknowledged. Some people need to be needed. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, what would you do if he tried to contact me directly? That's not for me to decide, I said, though the thought of Mark re-entering Eliza's life made my jaw clench. You're an adult. I trust your judgment. Even after everything that's happened. Especially after everything that's happened. You've learned from this experience, Eliza. I believe you'll make better choices going forward. She seemed to absorb this, nodding slowly. I think I'd tell him no. That chapter's closed for me. Then that's what you should do, I said, returning to my food preparation. For what it's worth, I think that's the right call. She smiled faintly. Thanks for not saying, I told you so. I'm saving those for special occasions, I joked. Like when you're fully recovered and can't escape by claiming injury. The evening passed peacefully, despite the storm that rolled in after dinner. We played cards, talked about Eliza's upcoming doctor's appointment, and discussed her tentative plans to start working remotely part-time the following week. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, without the undercurrent of tension that had characterized our interactions before the accident. As the storm intensified, the power flickered and then went out completely. I lit oil lamps and candles, filling the cabin with a warm, golden glow that reminded me of evenings from Eliza's childhood. "Remember the summer the power was out for 3 days?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as thunder rumbled overhead. How could I forget? We played charades until we ran out of movies and books to mime. And Mom made s'mores in the fireplace, Eliza added. She said power outages were nature's way of forcing families to pay attention to each other. She would have loved this, I said, gesturing to the two of us, illuminated by lamplight. No phones, no distractions. Just conversation. And questionable plumbing, Eliza added with a laugh as the pipes groaned in protest at the storm. We stayed up late that night, sharing stories about Sarah that we'd both kept to ourselves for too long. Eliza recalled details I'd forgotten, how her mother always sang off-key in the car, how she collected heart-shaped stones from every beach we visited, how she could never remember the punchline to jokes but laughed anyway. In turn, I shared memories from before Eliza was born, how Sarah and I had met at a bookstore when we both reached for the same dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, how she'd proposed to me rather than waiting for me to ask, how she'd painted the nursery yellow before we knew Eliza would be a girl because she said it was the color of possibility. As the storm gradually subsided and the oil in the lamps burned low, I realized we'd created something precious that night, a shared memorial to Sarah that acknowledged both our loss and the continuing presence of her memory in our... When Eliza finally yawned and announced she was ready for bed, I helped her to her room, making sure she had everything she needed within reach. "Dad?" she said as I turned to leave. "Thanks for bringing me here. I think I needed this more than I realized." "Me too," I admitted. "Good night, Liza." She didn't correct the nickname. "Good night, Dad." The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing, a surprising development, given that Eliza had never been an early riser. I made my way downstairs to find her at the stove, attempting to flip pancakes with one hand while balancing on her good leg. "You should have called me," I said, hurrying to take over. "I wanted to surprise you," she explained, surrendering the spatula. "Besides, I need to practice doing things on my own. I can't depend on you forever." The statement was matter-of-fact, not accusatory, but it reminded me that our time together at my house was temporary. Eventually, Eliza would move back to her own place, resume her independent life. The thought brought a mixture of pride and wistfulness. "Well, I'm impressed," I told her, rescuing a pancake that was beginning to burn. "Though your technique could use some refinement." "Critics," she scoffed, but she was smiling. "Coffee's good though, right?" I took a sip from the mug she'd set out for me. "Perfect." After breakfast, we decided to take advantage of the clear morning by sitting on the dock. Eliza brought her sketchbook again, and I carried a novel I'd been meaning to finish for months. The air was fresh after the storm, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. As I helped Eliza settle into one of the weathered Adirondack chairs that had guarded the dock for as long as I could remember, she said, "I've been thinking about what happens when we go back." "Oh." I marked my place in the book, giving her my full attention. "I think I'm ready to look at those apartments we discussed. The ones in your neighborhood." She adjusted her position, seeking comfort for her healing leg, if the offer still stands. "Of course it does," I assured her. "But what about your job? Won't the commute be difficult?" She hesitated. "Actually, I've been thinking about a change there too. My company's opening a satellite office closer to your area. I could transfer." This was news to me. "You'd want to do that?" "I think so," she said thoughtfully. "The accident made me reevaluate a lot of things, including what matters most to me." She met my eyes. family matters. Being close to the people who show up when it counts. I felt a swell of emotion I couldn't quite name. Joy mixed with relief, pride tangled with humility. "I'd like having you nearby," I said simply. "Very much." She nodded as if that settled it and turned her attention to her sketchbook. But I caught the small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, the same smile Sarah used to have when she knew she'd made the right decision. As the morning stretched into afternoon, I watched Eliza drawing, her face peaceful and focused in a way I hadn't seen since before the accident. Her recovery was far from complete, physically or emotionally, but in that moment, I could see the resilience that had always defined her character reasserting itself. The road ahead would still have its challenges. There would be difficult days, setbacks in her healing, moments when the pain, both physical and emotional, would feel overwhelming. But sitting there on the dock, with the sun warming our faces and the gentle lap of water against the pilings, I felt a quiet certainty that we would face those challenges together. The accident that had nearly taken my daughter from me had, instead, given us the chance to rebuild what had been broken, not identical to what we'd had before. We'd both changed too much for that, but something new and potentially stronger for having been tested. And for that unexpected blessing, despite all the pain that had accompanied it, I found myself profoundly grateful. Our time at Lake Harmony stretched into a full week, longer than we'd initially planned. Each day brought small but significant improvements in Eliza's mobility and, more importantly, in the ease between us. The silences that had once been awkward now felt comfortable, and the conversations that had once been guarded grew increasingly open. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. On our final morning at the cabin, I found Eliza sitting on the dock, her walking boots set aside as she dangled her feet in the water. She'd made her way there on her own, a testament to her progress. I joined her, handing over a mug of coffee as I lowered myself into the adjacent chair. "Last day," I observed, watching a heron glide across the surface of the lake, wings barely skimming the water. She agreed, accepting the coffee. "I almost don't want to leave." "We could stay longer," I offered. "I can work remotely, and you're not starting back until next week." She shook her head. "It's time. I have the apartment viewing tomorrow, and my follow-up with Dr. Winters on Friday." She took a sip of coffee. "Besides, we can't hide out here forever." The word hide caught my attention. "Is that what you feel we've been doing? Hiding?" Eliza considered this, her eyes on the horizon where morning mist still clung to the distant shore. "Not hiding exactly. More like regrouping, healing." She glanced at me. "It's been good for both of us, I think." I nodded, unable to argue with that assessment. "Your mother always said this place had special powers." "Restorative magic," Eliza quoted with a smile. That's what she called it. She wasn't wrong. We fell silent, watching the mist slowly burn away as the sun climbed higher. A fish jumped, creating ripples that spread in perfect circles across the glassy surface. "I've been thinking," Eliza said finally, "about what you said when we first got here. About real connections surviving distance and time." "And?" I prompted when she didn't continue. "I think there's more to it than that. I think connections survive when people actively choose to maintain them. When they put in the work." She looked at me directly. "We stopped doing that work, didn't we? After Mom died." The directness of her question, not an accusation but a genuine inquiry, deserved equal honesty. "Yes," I admitted, "I think we did. I was so focused on just getting through each day that I didn't pay attention to what was happening between us. The slow drift." "I did the same thing," she said. "It was easier to pull away than to face the gaps she left behind. And then it became a habit, the distance between us. Until the accident forced us back together," I added. "Not exactly how I would have chosen to reconnect," she said wryly. "But I'm grateful it happened. Not the accident itself, obviously, but the second chance it gave us." I finished for her. Me too. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After breakfast, we packed up the cabin in companionable silence. Eliza insisted on helping despite her limitations, directing me from her wheelchair as I stripped beds and cleaned the kitchen. By noon, the car was loaded, and we took one last look at the lake before heading back to the city. The drive home seemed shorter somehow, filled with conversation about plans for the coming weeks. Eliza was animated as she described the apartment she hoped to secure. A garden-level unit in a converted Victorian just 3 blocks from my house, with wide doorways that would accommodate her wheelchair during the final stages of her recovery. "The photos look perfect," she said, "and the location couldn't be better. I could wheel over for dinner even before I'm fully walking again." "You'd be welcome anytime," I told her, pleased by how naturally she assumed our renewed closeness would continue. As we neared the city, Eliza's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, and her expression darkened. "What is it?" I asked, glancing over. "Mark," she said, her voice flat. "He texted." I gripped the steering wheel tighter but kept my tone neutral. "What does he want?" "To talk. Says he's been thinking about us and realizes he made a mistake." She scoffed. 3 months too late. "What are you going to do?" She was silent for a moment, staring at the phone. Then, with deliberate calmness, she turned it off and slipped it back into her bag. "Nothing. Like I said at the cabin, that chapter's closed." I nodded, relief washing through me. Not because I was right about Mark, though I had been, but because Eliza was demonstrating a clarity and self-respect that made me profoundly proud. "That can't have been an easy decision," I said. "Actually, it was." She leaned back in her seat. "The hard part was admitting to myself that I deserved better all along." The apartment viewing the next day exceeded Eliza's expectations. The garden-level unit was bright and spacious, with original hardwood floors, tall windows, and a small private patio. The landlord, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, took an immediate liking to Eliza and didn't bat an eye at her wheelchair. "My late husband used a wheelchair for 15 years. She explained as she showed us the accessible bathroom that had been retrofitted with grab bars and a roll-in shower. "That's why I made these modifications. I want tenants who will appreciate them." Eliza signed the lease that afternoon, with a move-in date set for the 1st of the month, just 3 weeks away. As we drove home, she was quietly elated. "It feels right," she said, "like the universe is finally aligning things properly." "The universe? Or your own good decisions?" I suggested. She smiled. "Maybe both." The next day brought Eliza's follow-up appointment with Dr. Winters. I waited in the reception area while they conferred, thumbing through outdated magazines and checking emails on my phone. When Eliza emerged, her face was split in a wide grin. "Good news?" I asked, rising to meet her. "Great news," she corrected. "I can start weight-bearing therapy next week. If all goes well, I might be off crutches completely by the time I move into the new place." Dr. Winters, who had followed Eliza out, nodded in confirmation. "She's healing remarkably well. The bones have knitted cleanly, and the soft tissue damage is resolving faster than expected." "That's wonderful," I said, shaking the doctor's hand. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me," Dr. Winters replied with a smile. "Your daughter's determination is doing all the heavy lifting. Literally in this case." Outside the hospital, as I helped Eliza into the car, she said, "I've been thinking about what's next, after I'm fully recovered." "What do you mean?" "I've been exploring some ideas during my time off," she explained as I started the engine. "You know I've always loved drawing, but I haven't made time for it in years. The sketching I did at the lake reminded me how much it feeds my soul." "You were always talented," I agreed, "even as a child." "I'm thinking of taking some classes. Maybe working toward a side business doing illustration or graphic novels. Something separate from my day job that's just for me." The confidence in her voice warmed me. This was the Eliza I remembered from before. Curious, ambitious, eager to explore her potential. The accident had taken a physical toll, but in some ways it seemed to have awakened parts of her that had been dormant. "I think that sounds perfect," I told her. "Your mother would be over the moon." "I know." She smiled softly. I can almost hear her say, "Finally, you're using that gift I gave you." I laughed. In exactly that tone, too. The weeks leading up to Eliza's move were busy, but productive. She began weight-bearing therapy, graduated from the wheelchair to crutches full-time, and started packing up her old apartment with help from Karen and a few friends, including Jenna, who had proven to be a steadfast supporter throughout her recovery. I found myself engaged in my own preparations, repainting the guest room that Eliza would be vacating, organizing my home office to accommodate more remote work, and researching dog adoption sites. The latter was a promise I'd made to myself during our time at the lake. If Eliza was taking steps toward a fuller life, so would I. 2 days before the move, Eliza received another text from Mark. This time she let me read it. "I miss you. I made a terrible mistake. Please give me a chance to explain in person. I still love you." She watched my face as I read, perhaps looking for a reaction. I handed the phone back without comment, waiting for her to speak first. "He doesn't get it, does he?" she said finally. "It's not just about him abandoning me when I needed him most. It's about what that revealed about his character, and what the whole experience revealed about mine." "What did it reveal about yours?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That I'm stronger than I knew," she said simply. "And that I'd rather be alone than with someone who sees me as an inconvenience when things get difficult." I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. "What will you tell him?" "Nothing," she decided. "He doesn't deserve an explanation. Besides, I've already spent too much energy on someone who couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital." The morning of the move dawned bright and clear. Friends arrived early to help, Jenna and 2 other colleagues from Eliza's work, Karen and her husband, and a neighbor from my street who'd been checking in on Eliza throughout her recovery. Together we formed a caravan of cars between her old apartment and the new one, ferrying boxes and furniture across town. Eliza supervised from her crutches, directing traffic and making decisions about furniture placement. By mid-afternoon, the bulk of the work was done. Karen organized a pizza delivery for the helpers, and we all sat around Eliza's new living room, eating from paper plates and admiring the transformation of the empty space into a home. "A toast," Karen announced, raising her soda can. "To new beginnings and second chances. And to good friends who show up when it matters," Eliza added, looking around the room with genuine affection. As the gathering wound down and people began to leave, Eliza pulled me aside. "Will you stay a little longer? There's something I want to show you." Once we were alone, she led me to what would be her home office, a small room overlooking the private patio. Against one wall stood an easel I'd never seen before, with a canvas covered by a cloth. "I've been working on this at your place when you were at the office," she explained. "It's not finished yet, but I wanted you to see it." She removed the cloth to reveal a painting in progress, a view of Lake Harmony at sunset, with the silhouette of the A-frame cabin nestled among the pines. The colors were vibrant, the technique assured. It was beautiful, but what struck me most was the feeling it evoked, a sense of peace and belonging that perfectly captured our time there. "Eliza," I breathed. "This is extraordinary." "You really think so?" There was a vulnerability in her question that reminded me of the little girl who used to show me her drawings, hungry for approval. "I know so," I assured her. "You've captured exactly how it feels to be there." She smiled, clearly pleased. "It's for you, when it's finished." "A thank you for everything." I swallowed against the sudden tightness in my throat. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she told me. "Just promise you'll hang it somewhere you'll see it every day, to remind you that even when we're not physically together, we're still connected." "I promise," I said, pulling her into a careful hug, mindful of her still healing ribs. That evening, after helping Eliza settle into her new space, I returned to a house that felt strangely empty without her presence. For 3 months, I'd grown accustomed to her being just down the hall, the sound of her voice, her laughter, even the quiet rhythm of her breathing as she slept. I wandered from room to room, adjusting to the silence. In the guest bedroom, now stripped of her belongings, I found a small envelope propped against the lamp on the nightstand. Inside was a card with a simple message in Eliza's elegant handwriting. Dad, thank you for being the person who showed up every single day, even when it wasn't convenient. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what was right in front of me all along. That real love doesn't disappear when things get hard. It shows up precisely because things are hard. I'm grateful for our second chance. Let's not waste it. Love always, Liza. Yes, you can call me that again. I sat on the edge of the bed, reading the card twice more, letting the words sink in. The nickname, Liza, was as much a gift as the sentiment itself, a sign that the walls between us had truly come down. The next morning, I drove to the local animal shelter, card in my pocket like a talisman. The adoption counselor introduced me to several dogs, but it was a middle-aged golden retriever mix named Rusty who immediately captured my heart. His previous owner had died, leaving him in need of a new home. His gentle eyes and graying muzzle spoke of a wisdom that matched my own. He's perfect, I told the counselor. When can I take him home? Today, if you'd like, she replied. His paperwork is all in order. I texted Eliza a photo of Rusty from the shelter parking lot. Her response came immediately. OMG, he's adorable. Bringing him to dinner tonight. No excuses. And so began our new normal. Weekly dinners at her place or mine. Long walks with Rusty, who adored Eliza as much as I did. Weekend trips to the lake house when work allowed. As weeks turned to months, Eliza's physical recovery progressed steadily. By Thanksgiving, she was walking without assistance, though she still tired more easily than before. For the holiday, we hosted a small gathering at my house. Karen and her family, a few friends, and Mrs. Chen, who had no family nearby. Eliza insisted on cooking, filling the kitchen with delicious aromas and the sound of her humming as she worked. I watched her move around the space that had once been Sarah's domain, seeing echoes of my late wife and our daughter's gestures and expressions. After dinner, as everyone settled in the living room for coffee and dessert, I slipped away to my study and returned with a wrapped package. "What's this?" Eliza asked as I handed it to her. "Just a little something I found," I said. "Open it." She unwrapped the gift to reveal a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. On the cover, in Sarah's handwriting, was written, "For Eliza, when the time is right." Eliza looked up, confused. "Mom's journal?" "One of them," I explained. "I found it when I was clearing out the guest room after you moved. It was tucked behind the dresser. I think it fell there years ago." With reverent hands, Eliza opened the journal to the first page. Sarah's familiar script filled the margins around sketches of flowers, birds, and landscapes. "It's dated the year she got sick," Eliza said softly, turning pages. She was still drawing, even then. "Your mother never stopped creating," I told her. "It was how she processed the world, especially the difficult parts." Eliza continued through the journal, pausing occasionally to study a particular drawing or read a passage. Near the end, she gasped. "Dad, look!" She turned the journal so I could see. There, spanning 2 pages, was a detailed sketch of Eliza at 14. Bent over a drawing pad of her own, her face intense with concentration. Beneath it, Sarah had written, "My daughter, the artist. She doesn't see it yet, but one day she will recognize the gift she carries. Until then, I'll hold this truth for her." Tears filled Eliza's eyes. "She knew," she whispered. Even then, she knew. "Of course she did," I said gently. "She was your mother." Later that night, after the guests had departed and Eliza had settled into the guest room for the weekend, I sat on the back porch with Rusty at my feet. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's fireplace. Inside, I could hear Eliza moving about, the floorboards creaking in familiar patterns. I thought about the winding path that had brought us here, the accident that could have taken her from me forever, but had instead given us a chance to rebuild what time and grief had eroded. I thought about Sarah's journal, hidden all these years only to emerge at exactly the moment Eliza needed her mother's wisdom most. And I thought about the word inconvenient, how it had been wielded as a weapon by someone who claimed to love Eliza, but had ultimately become the catalyst for her reclaiming her strength, her creativity, and her true self. Life's most profound gifts, I realized, often arrive disguised as inconveniences, wrapped in challenges that test our character and reveal our deepest truths. The accident that had nearly claimed my daughter had, paradoxically, saved our relationship. The pain and betrayal she'd experienced had cleared the path for authentic healing and growth. From inside the house, I heard Eliza call my name. I rose, rusty at my heels, and went to her. Not because it was convenient, but because that's what love does. It shows up. It stays present. It finds the blessing hidden within the burden, and it chooses connection over comfort every single time. As I stepped back into the warmth of the home we were rebuilding together, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them side by side, father and daughter, bound not just by blood, but by a love that had been tested, broken, and ultimately made stronger through the very trials that might have destroyed it. Some might call it inconvenient. I called it the greatest privilege of my life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.